So we need to know the texture. Likewise, we need to know the quantity of those nutrients in the soil in terms of the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Sometimes some of them may be adequate, while some may be low. And you may in some instances find all of them to be adequate, which means you don't need to add anything to it. The soil testing will also give us an indication of the organic matter content of the soil, whether we need to improve it or not. The pH of the soil, whether it is alkaline or acidic. All these things are very, very essential for crop production. There are another techniques for sustainable soil fertility is the crop rotation. Crop rotation. This means planting different crops at different times. For example, if we plant maize now, after harvesting maize, we may decide to go for leguminous crops. After the leguminous crops, we may decide to go for for tuber crops. This also helps in maintaining the fertility of the soil. For example, by the time you plant leguminous crops, they help in adding nitrogen to the soil. And this also helps in moderating the amount of nutrients removed from the soil at any particular point in time. So crop rotation is also essential. Then we have cover cropping. Cover cropping just means that we don't leave the soil bare without anything on top. For example, especially in the dry season, because the sun, during the dry season, the sun will be eating up the soil, and as such, will be removing almost everything, leaching the nutrients in the soil. So by the time it gets to the rainy season, or whenever you want to use it, it may be difficult. I mean, by that time, the nutrients in the soil might have been depleted to a very minimal stage. So cover cropping is also essential in our soil fertility management. Don't let the soil just be bare, laying there like that. I mean, some just clearing it like that. Let something always be on the soil at any particular point in time. Then incorporation of organic matter. Organic matter helps in many ways. It helps us to hold the nutrients. It also helps to hold the water, which we'll still talk about in the soil. So organic matter, in fact, that's the live body. That's the live wire of the soil. It is very, very essential. Then we have mulching. Just like I said, you don't just leave the soil. You put some things on it as a kind of cover. And live mulching, we have different types. We have the live mulch, we have the plastic mulch, we have the organic mulch. Live mulch means plants growing there on the field. Plants growing on the field. Plastic mulch are the use of nylons. They are in form of nylons where we spread it on the field. They also have their uses and their benefits. Part of the benefit is they conserve moisture. They reduce the weed on the soil. Then we have the organic mulch. Organic mulch are just like the plant debris. And in some climes, after harvesting their crops, they just remove all the grasses and everything they harvest, and they just go and pour it somewhere else. No, it is not ideal. You leave them there on that soil to decompose. While they are decomposing, they are adding organic manure into the soil. And the moment they are still there, they are also serving as organic mulch, even on the soil. Then they also help. Another technique for sustainable soil fertility management is erosion control measure, terracing, strip cropping, and so on, especially where we have a field that is slopy. We always encourage, don't do your ridges along the slope. You can do it across, so they will help to do a kind of barriers in breaking the water and in reducing the erosion on the field. So erosion control is also a measure for sustainable soil fertility management. Then we have integrated nutrient management. Integrated nutrient management means using different components in achieving the same aim. In integrated nutrient management, we use both organic and inorganic manure. Organic manure will serve as the basis while we apply our inorganic manure. And the reason for this is because inorganic, most times when you apply them, especially during heavy rains, they leaches almost immediately. So you may not find anything, but the organic manure there presently helps to hold the inorganic manure before leaching. So we also have efficient water management, which is also very, very important. From our photosynthesis, we know water, sunlight, they are essential for plants to grow. So water, any plants that does not see water at the appropriate time when needed or in adequate proportion gets stunted and is not going to help the crop. Then we move to benefits of sustainable soil fertility management before water management. When we have a good fertility management on our field, it improves the soil fertility and productivity of the soil. It reduces erosion and degradation. It enhances water infiltration and storage within the soil. It increases resilience to climate change and supports long-term agricultural sustainability. What do I mean by that? If you have a reasonable quantity of organic manure, organic matter in the soil, that soil can be used for a long period of time. But for a soil that does not have adequate amounts, after the first or second cropping season, you may need to abandon such soil and move to another place and leave that place to fallow. And leave that place to fallow for it to regain back the lost nutrients. And with the present state of things, unlike the olden days, we don't have that luxury of land that we can be moving from one place to the other. So the one we have to be able to maintain it so that it will continue to be useful for us, at least for a reasonable period of time. Now, we move to water management. What do we mean by water management? Water management means a plant control, application, and conservation of water resources in supporting crop production. There are three keywords there: the plant control, then the application and conservation. But in the use of the word plant control, that can only be used probably in the dry season or when there is a cessation of rain. But if it is rainfall, we are not God, so there's nothing we can do other than to conserve it, maybe through proper erosion, drainage, infiltration, and all the likes. Then application, of course, like I said, maybe during the dry spell, we do our own application via irrigation. Then conservation, that includes storage of water for use at the appropriate time. Water management involves adequate use and application of water resources. Storage, like I said, for some of us, we may not have enough resources maybe to dig borehole or something of that on our field. So what we rely on is storage of water, maybe during the rain season. We call it rain harvester. You channel, maybe use storage tank or a concreted, like a septic tank, where you collect the water during rainy season for use during the dry season when you need to apply. Then drainage management. Some fields, the way they are, you need to find the kind of drainage for them so that the water there won't be water logging on a particular spot, because water logging will also not help our plants. The reduction of water losses via erosion is also very, very important in water management. Then next is importance of water in vegetable production. Water is essential for vegetable production in many areas. starting from our seed germination. If we put our seed inside the soil and there's no water, the soil is dry, maize seed, for example, if we see maize seed when it's growing, you will discover that it has swollen a bit from its normal size by the time it starts growing. So it has imbibed some water before it starts germinating. So water is very, very essential in seed germination. In nutrient uptake too, yes, our soils may be adequate in nutrients, but without water, the nutrients in the soil cannot get to the plants. It is the nutrients, it is the water that dissolves the nutrients, and from it moves through the roots to the stem and to the branches of the plant. So water is also very, very essential in nutrient uptake. On dry soils, the nutrients the plant will not be able to take the water. Then cell expansion, just like I said in the case of maize seed, yes, the water helps in cell expansion, which encourages the growth of the plants. In photosynthesis, just like I said earlier, water, sunlight are very, very essential in photosynthesis and for the crop and in plant growth. Then plant growth generally, at every stages of the plant requires water. Though the amount required at different stages may differ, but the plant requires water at every stage of its growth. And if it does not get the water in the right amount or quantity, then stunting will start and the plant starts drying up. Then in flowering and fruit development, water is also very, very essential. Then temperature regulation. It reduces when there's adequate moisture in the soil, it reduces the heat in the soil, which we also not allow their plants to get stunted. Then water stress can cause, like I said, wilting, stunted growth, poor flowering, and flower abortion. Then ultimately results to poor yield and reduced produce quality, and which is the main goal of any agricultural enterprise. But there are challenges to water management. Next slide, please. There are challenges to water management, and one of them is erratic rainfall, like we are experiencing nowadays due to climate change. Sometimes the rainfall starts late than we usually be, or expands more than it is, and even the intensity is nothing to write home about. So erratic rainfall is a challenge in water management. Then droughts during the dry spell, if there is no water and there is no provision of irrigation facilities, it will affect our crops on the field. Then poor drainage for areas that are prone to waterlogging. If the water is not properly channeled, the waterlogging will not allow the plants to grow, except for a few plants like rice. But for the other plants like our vegetables, they won't do well in waterlogging area. Even the rice, there are certain types, not all rice does well in waterlogging area. Then we have soil compaction. Yeah, and this results mostly in when we have a lot of clay in the soil. There will be soil compaction. It will reduce the pore spaces in the soil, which will not give enough room for air inside the soil. It will not give enough room for air inside the soil, so and the plants will not be able to do well. Then high irrigation costs for poor resource farmers is also a challenge, because setting up irrigation facilities now is also not a small task. Then limited irrigation facilities on the field may also affect water management. Then poor water use efficiency, when we are not applying enough or at the appropriate time that we are supposed to apply. It also affects water management. Then, one of the essential ways of managing water on the field is irrigation. So we talk on irrigation. Irrigation means artificial application of water to crops. Let's know the word artificial application, because we cannot control rain. So irrigation is mostly done during the dry season, or maybe in the greenhouse where we don't want a natural rainfall. We want a controlled environment. But if it is in an open field and during the rainy season, we may not be able to control the amount or quantity of water at any particular point in time. So, but for the dry season or in a controlled environment, that we may be able to control. So we have artificial application of water to crops. Then we have three major irrigation methods: the surface irrigation, the sprinkler irrigation, and the drip irrigation. In selecting any of these three, selection will depend on the type of crop we have, the crop density on the field, the soil type, the availability of water, probably the quantity of water we have, the farm size, the topography of the field, then the costs and available of the costs, how much we have to embark on irrigation facilities, and the available technology at any point in time. Let's talk about surface irrigation. Surface irrigation is an irrigation type where gravity force is used to distribute water over the soil. In these instances, water stored in maybe storage tanks or septic tanks are usually used. Usually storage tanks, they place it on a raised platform. They insert hose, and they now use the hose to take water through different channels to the plants. But this is usually beneficial in slopy areas where the force of gravity will help to push the water down. So in this case, we don't need maybe a generator or a pumping machine to distribute the water. The force of gravity itself will be used in distributing the water to the crops. So advantages of surface irrigation is low costs, and it can be used in slopy lands. However, the disadvantage is inadequate for big fields. When we have acreage of lands, we cannot use surface irrigation, will not be suitable. High accuracy most times are required during irrigation, which we may not be able to get with surface irrigation. And like I said, it's not adequate on lands with high filtration rates. What do I mean by that? A land that dries up water very fast, it may not be very, very adequate, because as the water is moving down there, the water goes down and may not be available for use of the crops for a long period of time. Then sprinkler irrigation. Sprinkler irrigation is a method of applying water in a controlled manner to simulate rainfall. Let's get that word, simulate rainfall, which means it's the way and manner which which the water will get to the plant will be like as if rain is falling on the plant. And we have different types of sprinkler irrigation and the radius by which it can cover. The advantages: efficient water management. Like I said, different types with different radius. We have some that can go as far as 3-meter radius, and it distributes the water uniformly within that 3-meter radius. So you set it at every 3-meter radius, you put your different sprinklers there for them to be distributing the water to the field. Then we have uniform water application, suitable for various soils. and suitable for irrigating crops with high population density. Yes. Like our vegetables, maybe our amaranth, celosia that we have in with high population on the field, we can use sprinkler, so it gets to a reasonable number of the plants on the field. Disadvantages: debris and the sediments can cause clogging. The mouths from which the waters are coming out may get blocked from the water, probably from the source of the water. Maybe there are some debris or impurities in the water which can block the hose there that are distributing the water. It is costly, unlike the surface irrigation, and it is sensitive to wind. When we have high wind blowing, so it may not allow it to distribute the water uniformly as it ought to be. Then we go to drip irrigation. Drip irrigation is when water is released slowly and directly to the crop root zone. Slowly and directly to the crop root zone. In fact, this is the best type of irrigation for crops. Maybe our tree crops, our crops that are planted at reasonable distances apart, but it is very, very expensive. Advantages: high water use efficiency, the water gets to the root zone, and the plant will be able to use the water maximally. Reduced evaporation, reduced runoff, suitable for vegetable production like pepper, tomato, can be used for fertigation. That is, in the water that will be supplying to the plants, we can add our nutrients there. So the nutrient too will just be going to the root zones. Disadvantages: high initial cost. Like I said, it's very, very expensive. Emitters, like in the sprinklers too, those points that are supposed to be dropping the water may also get clogged. Then requires regular maintenance by removing the debris, the clogs. Then by the time we are planting crops that are not of the same measurements with the ones that you have done, like if you are planting our tomato 50 cm apart, the clogs that we'll be using in that particular sprinkler will be 50, we will have driven 50 centimeter apart. But if you now want to plant another crops that require maybe 30 cm apart, that particular one may not be useful for get another one. So those are issues with drip irrigation. However, with drip irrigation, there's also some technique that we used of recent in my place of work, is the use of buckets. We get 7 liters buckets. We now use pin, a needle, to insert a very tiny hole underneath the buckets. So why we want to water, though actually we use this for tree crops. So when we want to water those tree crops at the very early stages of of planting, we now pour the water inside those buckets. So instead of us just pouring water on the plants, we pour the water on those buckets. We now set it in such a way that the water will be dripping to the root zone of the plant in a gradual process. So it takes sometimes 1-2 hours before exhausting the water in those buckets. And in doing so, the plants, those crops, were able to maximize the use of those water than just pouring those water on the plants and going. So that's also another way, as if you want to use tree crops or something. And it can also be used for vegetable, but it may also be costly because depending on the number of plants you have, you depend on the number of buckets you have to get. Now, when we are doing our irrigation, there's something called irrigation scheduling, which implies when to irrigate, next slide, quantity of water to apply, and the frequency of irrigation. Like I said, most crops require water but in different quantities and at different time of their growth. When to irrigate? I personally would prefer irrigating in the evening when the sun is going down. Why? The soil, the water will stay longer in the soil overnight before rain, before the sun sets again. But if we put irrigate in the morning, within hours, especially during high intensity of sunlight, the water gets dried off immediately. So for crops that we need just to irrigate once, maybe like I said, like the tree crops, like I said earlier, I would prefer irrigating in the evening so the water stays longer in the soil for the use of the plants. Then quantity of water to apply. Yeah, the quantity is also very, very essential. For crops at the very early growth stage may not require that much, but when they get to the vigorous stage, during for example, vegetable, when they get to the after the early stages, the first 2-3 weeks may not require much water, but after that, they requires more water than the earlier stages. So the quantity of water to apply is also very, very essential. The frequency of irrigation, like I said, if for tree crops, yeah, we can do it once. If we are doing it in the evening, it's sustained there, the water is there till morning. But for vegetables, we may do it twice. Also depending on the facilities available. In the morning, early in the morning, and towards the late in the evening. Everything is just for the plants to do well and have adequate moisture, especially during the very, very dry season when the soil intensity is very, very high. We need to take note of that. And scheduling of irrigation is dependent on the soil moisture, how the soil is presently before applying the water, the crop growth stage, like I said earlier, the weather conditions, like I said earlier, water that will be required for irrigation during the extreme dry season will be more than maybe during the rainy season when we have cessation of rains a bit. So then evapotranspiration, of course, it will also be high during the dry season, so the soil will require more water. Then the soil type, yeah, for soils that are very, very sandy, the frequency of irrigation will also needs to be high, twice or thrice, because as you are applying, the soil goes down the soil and it gets dried off from the root zone almost immediately. So we need to increase the irrigation schedule for soils like sandy soils. Then visual signs of water stress. Yeah, we also need at least to be very, very observant of our plants to see if they are showing us any signs of wilting that may require. Then let's move to water conservation techniques. Water conservation techniques. I start with mulching. Like I said earlier, we have 3 types: the live mulching, the plastic mulching. This helps to conserve the moisture on the field for the use of the crops. Then, like we just finished talking about, irrigation is a means of conserving water in the soil. Rainwater harvesting, that's for those of us that may not have the benefits of having a deep well or bowl, as it may be, on our field. We may need to harvest rainwater during the rainy season for our use during the dry season. So it's also a means of water conservation techniques. Then conservation tillage, that means just having plants on the field so that the soil will not just be it not get dried on time. That may be a purposeful planting of crops during it may be leguminous crops or any cover crops. It could be mokuna or anything for our conservation. Then little disturbance under conservation tillage. We also have little disturbance to our soil so that it will minimize erosion on the field. Then, like I said earlier too, we have cover cropping where we plant some crops on the field so that the soil will not just be barefooted to avoid direct sunlight on the field. Then organic matter application is also very, very essential. It helps to hold water at the same time, nutrients in the soil. Then improve soil structure. The soil structure of our field is also very, very essential. For example, clay soil, a soil with too much clay will not be adequate. It will not encourage root growth, proper root growth. It will diminish the pore spaces, which will not allow airs in the soil. So improving the soil structure is also a way of enhancing our water conservation. Then we'll now go to soil and water management in vegetable production. Soil and water management in vegetable production. The amount of water available to plants depends on the soil texture, the structure, the organic matter, porosity, bulk density, and the root depth of the plants. Like texture, structure of the soil affects the water holding capacity of the soil. So it is very, very important. Then the quantity of organic matter present in the soil will also determine the amount of water that the soil can be able to hold at any point in time. Before planting, like I said earlier, we need to conduct what we might soil testing to know what the soil entails, the organic matter present in the soil, the major nutrients, elements, and legs. Then the soil pH needs to be corrected if it is not adequate. For most vegetable crops, this pH is usually between the adequate pH is usually between 5.5 and 7. Anything below 5.5 or above 7 is not adequate. So when that happens, we need to correct via liming or whatever. Then appropriate organic matter. Yeah, we need organic matter. It may be through animal droppings or through the live mulch, but there needs to be adequate organic matter in the soil. Then, depending on whatever we are planting, we need a well-prepared and suitable beds. If it is for our vegetables, usually here, in this side of the country, usually we use flat beds for our vegetables. Then drainage. We should ensure that the field is well drained so that there will not be waterlogging on the field, which may kill our plants. Then during production, we need to ensure that we have adequate moisture and mulch where appropriate. That means the field should not be left dried for a long period of time, because if it is getting too long, the plant starts wilting, stunted growth, and if you now apply water at that stage, yes, they may recover, but the shock will definitely still be noticed in their growth. Irrigate according to crop needs. Then apply appropriate nutrients. The nutrients to be applied will be determined by the soil nutrients. If we have enough nitrogen and phosphorus and the potassium is not enough, that means we don't need to apply nitrogen and phosphorus. We just go to the application of potassium alone. So we need to apply the appropriate nutrients, then ensure that the feed is weed free, which is very, very essential, as the weeds will compete with nutrients with other plants growing on the field. Then we need to avoid waterlogging, like I have said earlier, on the field, which is very, very essential. So as I try to round up this lecture, I will like to leave us with this take home. In any agricultural production we are doing, number one, it is essential for us to conduct soil testing before planting. It is very, very essential. Then fertilizer application should be based on soil test, not blanket application like most of us do. In some soils, we may discover that we don't even need to apply anything and our plants will do well. And in some, we may need to apply, but not as much as the lands that are very degraded. So our soil testing will guide us on the quantity and the type of fertilizer to be applied at any point in time. So let us avoid blanket application, as sometimes this also just take us our money away, because the fertilizer we are applying at that particular time may not be useful for the plants. Then the use of organic manure, it is very, very essential. And at this, I will also, like I said earlier too, in our fertilizer application, we encourage integrated nutrient management, which include organic and inorganic. So in our vegetable production, we can apply our organic manure prior to planting. We can apply our organic manure prior to planting and incorporate it into the soil. Then while we apply inorganic manure during the crop growth stage, both of them are very, very essential. Except we are targeting our produce for exports. That's another area. If we are targeting our produce for exports, we should take note of what is required for that export, as most of them requires, though they don't like inorganic fertilizer application, especially at a very, very high rate. So anybody targeting export production, we encourage the person to use organic manure strictly for exports, for those that are targeting exports. Then we use mulch to conserve moisture, as we've discussed earlier. Then adopt efficient irrigation system. Then harvest and store rainwater where possible for our use for later, for those of us that may not have access to deep wells or borehole facilities on our field. In conclusion, healthy soils. Next slide, please. Healthy soils is the foundation of sustainable vegetable production, while efficient water management is essential for high and stable vegetable yields. Mulching, organic matter management, and efficient irrigation improve soil and water use efficiency. Sustainable soil and water management can improve food security, farmers' income, and environmental sustainability. Climate smart agriculture provides an integrated approach to improving productivity and resilience. Thank you for your attention.
Wow, that's amazing. What an amazing session. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your knowledge, for taking out time to share your knowledge. Please let us appreciate him. Wow, this is an impactful session for me. Thank you so much, sir. Please, I want to see your appreciation on the chat box. Let's thank him. Write it on the chat box. I've not seen anyone. Okay. Thank you once again. So, how's the session? How was the session so far? Just tell me one thing that stood out for you, one thing you learned, one thing that stood out for you. You can unmute your mic to speak, or you can just write it on the chat box. Just one thing that stood out for you. Okay, the bucket method for irrigation. Okay, that's good. And if you have any question, you can unmute your mic and speak and just, or you can just write it on the chat box. Any questions so far? Any question can just signify. Is it only one person that learned something today? Because I'm seeing Temitope for that is it only one person? So if you have any question, if you don't have, just say none from my end. But I want to believe that you have question. Okay, you have the floor. I see your hand. You can unmute and speak.
Good
Ashanu,
evening, everyone. Good
good
evening.
evening. You are welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful presentation. At least it cleared some of the things about soil fertility. I've been having issues with that. And then what I want to ask is, what happens when there is so much water in the soil? Talked about irrigation. That's when there is insufficient water in the soil and we need to add. So what happens when it is too much? What can we do to prevent too much water in the soil, or to protect our crops when there's too much water? Thank you.
All right, thank you for the question. Like I said, when there is too much, that's when I say there will be water logging on the field. You can create a kind of drainage channel around the field. That doesn't mean we should go to swampy area. That will not work, because we know swampy area generally during the rainy season gets waterlogged. But that place was also very useful for us during the dry season. And in this part of the country, we call it Akuro, where we can do our farming. It will just require, because the soil will still be moist by that time, to the streams there. So it will just require little addition of water. The land in that Akuro doesn't get dried off entirely during the dry season. But for fields that are not Akuro, that is waterlogged, I think it has to do with the topography. It has to do with the topography of the place. So in such area, we could create a kind of drainage channel where the water, when it is in excess, can be moving away from our field, so that it won't be it won't get make our field to be waterlogged. I hope I'll be able to answer the question.
Ashanu, can you hear him?
Yes, yes, sir. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Okay. So who has any question can just unmute and speak, or you can write it on the chat box. All right. If there is no question, you can still write what stood out for you.
The two people raise their
Okay, I'm
hands. We have
seeing you so
Olamide
fast.
and so please ask your questions. Still have a couple of time. I know.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I had an experience this time with my learners in school. I did a practical with bottles for drip irrigation, fix it into the soil. Though there was no land, so I went to get loamy soil from the school farm. The school farm was already occupied. I poured it in the garden with my learners, but I observed that that particular soil was bad, just like the facilitator said. So I placed the bottles there, made holes under the bottles, and what I observed is the soil itself was a bad soil. Plants on that particular soil where we got them from were also not thriving well. Once they grow, the sprout, when it gets to week 2, they die back. So that's what my learners observed, that the corn that were planted on that soil we went to pack safe, they are not thriving well. Dump hill, a very dark soil on a dump hill. We used to think soil on dustbins are good, but I think there's maybe a component or something in that soil that is killing the plants. Once they are growing, they just die back. Same thing happened as we packed the sand, put it there. So I was trying to teach drip irrigation using available resources, plastic bottles, we dig it into the soil. I would have shared the pictures with you. It worked elsewhere. The drip irrigation irrigated the soil, the roots deep, but this time it didn't work. I was so pained because it was a month to closing, and my learners, I was working on SDG goal 2, zero hunger, and they couldn't harvest vegetables home. So I just to corroborate what the facilitator was saying, when the soil is bad, it's as good as we are not planting anything at all. And what can we do? I think we know what to do. Okay, now that we know the soil is bad, what can we do to that soil? Because it's a dump hills are good, very dark soil. Nobody believed that such a soil won't thrive. So what do you think is the organic or component that is in that soil that is killing those plants? Yeah, I will appreciate if you can respond to this, because if you look at the soil, very dark, looking good on a dump hill, but whenever the vegetables or plants grow, the corn, the whatever, they get to week 2, they just begin to die back. And when I even thought maybe there was this onion water we sprayed on it because I saw termites on the soil. Maybe the onion water caused it. No, we've been using onion water as our local way of pesticide. Kindly say something about my whole situation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, dump hills generally have good soils. However, like I said, we encourage soil testing. In that instances, what I suspected was that the soil has been infected or contaminated, so to say. Well, you said you planted corn, but for assuming it is a vegetable, you may have bacterial blights on the soil, you may have fungal infection, you may have viral infection on the soil. So it's possible that is any of these ones that is also affecting the corn you planted. So in fact, that also leads me. So when we are doing, especially for some vegetables like tomato and pepper, we encourage soil testing not only for fertility, we also encourage for, what do you call it? For microbial loads to ascertain the fungi and the bacteria on the soil so as to reduce the possibility of having bacterial wastes or fungal infection on the food. So it could be anything. Yes, but from your description, dark soils, I believe the soil is fertile. I want to believe, but it could be infection. So then where the bottles, do you have hose underneath it for draining the water? Because when you have excess water too and the water could not go out, it could also result into dieback. You should have some small holes like we have in the polythene bags we use for nurseries. You put some small holes there. So the bottles should have some small holes there for draining the water in case of excess water. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I hope can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I hope he has been able to answer your question, right?
Yes, to an extent, he said it could have been infected, of course, the soil. Even the vegetables, the
Okay.
corn, so I don't know. I shared the picture. I don't know. Did you see it? Or are we? I don't know if you could see that.
Yes, I saw it.
Yes,
That was
we
why I
saw
was
it.
asking. Do you have holes underneath those
They are
bottles?
old. They are old. They are tiny.
Oh,
In fact, the irrigation worked. Like the learners noticed that if I cover the bottle, it reduces the infiltration. If I open the bottle, more water. Do you understand that?
I do.
Comes out. Okay, so but that soil, the plants came out, they sprouted a week too.
Yeah,
And
it
they
could
died
be
down.
infection. Yeah, it could be infection. Then another thing is
I was seeing termite on the
yes,
soil. So I bought onion water, sprayed on that termite, not even on the vegetables, because I know when you spray anything on nurseries, those were onion water. I think you know onion water can also be used
yeah,
as
I do.
so
Yeah,
I just sprayed
that's
on
why I
that
said.
particular termite, and
Yeah,
suddenly, I don't know, my vegetables were not coming up again. My learners were the ones that said even the corn on the farm were not doing well unless those corn far away, deep into the. I was like, oh, that particular dump hill, is there something there? So soil testing, like you said, sir. How
yeah.
can we test for soil? Yeah. What
Then
can we do to test
another
for
thing. Let me
soil?
add this too. Another thing. When you take soil from dump hills, there's also the possibility of heavy metals. So they could also be a contributory factor. High heavy metals in those soils. Yeah. Then how to test the soil is majorly taking the soil samples to the lab. They will do the analysis in the lab. Is a lab work. Though we have some soil test kits for those that may have opportunity to it, but the common one is just take your soil samples to the lab, and they will tell you what the soil has at that time.
Thank you so much, sir.
All
Thank you
right.
so much. Is there any other question? Okay, so I think there's a question in the chat. Someone says, is it Beryl? Beryl says, how do we measure soil fertility and soil health? The difference in measuring? I don't know. Has that been answered?
I have a question, please.
Okay, please.
Should I go ahead? Okay. So this is my question. We've spoken about you taught us about soil health. Now my question is, we have so many farmers that in fact most farmers rely heavily on chemical fertilizers because everybody wants quick results, everybody wants good yield, good productivity. But over time, we realize that the soil becomes like less fertile. So now how can farmers, especially smallholder farmers like myself, how can we gradually restore this soil health while we are still maintaining good yields and still making profits?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, thank you for the question. For the question on the chat, how can we measure soil fertility? Like I said, it's just taking our soil samples. There's a way we do it, a random collection of soil samples from the field. Then we take it to the lab. We have a lab and soil analysis lab. Then they will tell us what is present in the soil. So that is just the basics. Then, like I said too, we have some soil testing kits for those that may have access to it that can do some quick tests like the pH and some other ones on the field with immediate effects. Then the question is, he's talking about the use of inorganic which depletes the soil. That was why when I was talking about integrated nutrient management, I said that is what we encourage now because of the the lands we have now, unlike in the olden days when our fathers do shifting cultivation, move from one land to the other. But nowadays, we have limited land resources, so the little we have to be able to maintain it so that we can use it for a long period of time. That's why I said we encourage integrated nutrient management, which involves the use of both organic and inorganic fertilizer at the same time. Don't let us depend on inorganic fertilizer alone. When we depend on inorganic fertilizer alone, just like you said, over time, the soil will get depleted and the organic matter content in the soil will also get depleted to an extent that you will not be able to plant on that farm for another 2 or 3 years, which you have to leave the farm to fallow. So, but if you are using organic alongside with your inorganic, the organic will help to hold the texture and the structure of the soil together. So, and it will not allow the plants you are planting on that field to deplete the nutrients in the soil to the extent that you will not want to use it for a long period of time. So, what in essence you can do is incorporating both organic and inorganic together. You incorporate your organic into your soil before planting, a week or 2 weeks, depending on what you are planting, into the soil. Yeah, and your organic manure could, like I also said, could be anything. Could be your animal droppings, whether it's poultry, sheep, goats, cow, or even pig. And it could even be the live mulch. Like I said, I also don't encourage people when you finish clearing your field. Some people will remove the debris and just go and pour it somewhere else. No, you leave the debris too on the field to decay. So as the debris is decaying on the field, it's also increasing the organic matter content of the soil. At the same time, the nutrients that those debris had absorbed, part of it will also be returned back into the soil. So in doing that, you will be able to use the soil for a reasonable period of time. So that's what you can do, but don't just depend solely on inorganic fertilizer. Over time, the field will get depleted to an extent that you will not be able to use it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, everyone. I think we've taken all the questions. Right. So, since we've taken all the questions, so we are rounding up now. First off, I would post the. Okay, so that said, I'll just like before our facilitator goes, can one or two people just share what they really learned today's session? I mean, I think that's something we would also like to hear. Just one or two, what you learned from today's session. At least the facilitator is there. Let's see that you really caught it. Any volunteers? So because it's been sharing a lot since morning. So what's that one thing that right now you are taking away from this task and you will start doing immediately? Because that's the essence of it. Yes, allow me, love.
All right, so we spoke about soil health, and from what I learned, in my own words, I would just say we are not expected to guesswork when it comes to knowing the state of our health, the state of our soil, the health status of our soil. We're not supposed to just guess. We ought to carry out the necessary, what's the word now? Necessary tests to know what is actually in the soil and what we need to add to the soil. So I think that's one thing that stood out for me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm glad that you got that. Anyone else? What stood out for you? Just one more person, and then we can take pictures and call it a close.
Hello.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Hello. Yes, we can.
Okay. What I learned from today were the challenges to water management, which we talked about erratic rainfall. He talked about poor water and efficiency and high irrigation costs, and poor drainage, droughts, and other factors that can cause challenge to water management, especially during dry season or when there is an erratic rainfall on farmlands or during farming processes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's brilliant. I think I see someone else raising their hand. Beryl, do you want to say something?
Okay, thank you. That came out clear for me is that as farmers, sometimes we blame the soil that we are planting on, but it is our fault that we are giving the wrong crop for a given soil, and that is really making us we may avoid using our farms thinking that it's not fertile enough, but it is us giving the wrong crop to the farm. So the issue about soil fertility and soil health also stood out for me. I didn't know the difference, but now it really came out clear. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for sharing that. And I see that our facilitator too. See that you've learned one or two. Someone says avoid just planting without knowing the soil health. I learned about major irrigation methods. Great to see all of this. And so thank you so much. Right now I've dropped the link to the post assessment form in the group. So please, Mary, you can also help me share that. So in the meantime, please can we all unmute our mics and say thank you, Dr. Olaleye. Thank you so much. And then let's take our group picture. Maybe you can stop
Thank
sharing
you,
the screen
Dr.
now.
Thank you, Dr. Olaleye.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate
Thank you
the
thank you for having me. I'm grateful.
Thank you so much, sir. So it's time for our group picture. Please, Mary, stop sharing your screen now. Please put on your video and let's take our group picture. And